What's up, Coachable family? Welcome back to the Coachable podcast. I'm your host, Tori Gordon, and I'm very excited for another episode of the show because this week I'm joined by Travis Chappell, a new friend of mine who's in studio, also a Vegas local. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Always happy to make the long trip over to the Wynn for some recording. So.
I know. Sometimes the longest trip is just the strip. Traffic and construction has been terrible, so it actually has been taking quite a bit of time.
It is the worst. Like I was half joking when I said that because I live here, but also not joking at all because I live, 6-7 miles from here, but I had to leave like an hour before our scheduled time because I know that like there's going to be traffic, then you got to park, then you got to walk. It's just like every time we come to the strip, it reminds me why, as a Vegas local, I never come to the strip.
Right, I know. So hopefully we'll make it worth it because there is so much traffic and like construction happening. There's, for those who aren't in Vegas, Formula One's coming.
Yep.
They're trying to get the city ready for that. There's a lot of, plus there's this conference.
The A's Stadium just got announced.
Yes. Where is that going to be?
I think at the Flamingo.
Yep.
Like I think they're tearing down a portion of it, and I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be wild.
So we're getting baseball.
All we need is the NBA now.
That's the next thing.
I know.
And
if the NBA comes, I'm getting season tickets.
Heck yeah. Because, hockey's killing it.
Hockey's great.
Hockey's killing it. We're in the Stanley Cup. We need the Raiders to do well this year. Are you a big sports fan?
I'm a big sports guy.
Yeah.
Basketball's my favorite sport. That's why I say, like, if the NBA comes, I'll be there.
Yeah. Cool.
But hockey's fun, though. The hockey games here are so much fun to go.
I had never been to a hockey game before I moved here. And so I feel like I just get spoiled when it comes to sports. Like, I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So Alabama football, the whole culture there was, I just assumed everyone had the same sort of experience. And I realized very quickly after I left college that was not the case. And then coming here and hockey being such the way that they do it and the performances, they do it like Vegas does any other.
Vegas style,
it's Vegas style, but apparently that's not the way it is in every other part
the
of
Knights,
the country.
it was such a weird thing because, in the States, there's just not that many communities built around hockey, But since Vegas never had any pro sports teams, and then the Knights moved here, and it was the year of the shooting that happened. So there's this big like local kind of community that was kind of burgeoning out of that whole catastrophe.
Yeah.
And then the Knights came, and they're an expansion team and made it to the Stanley Cup their first year. So like the entire when we moved here, it was like everybody was out at the bars, everybody had Knights jerseys on. And I was like, we're all rooting for hockey? You guys know this is hockey, right?
Right.
But yeah, you if you move here and you're into sports at all, even if you weren't a hockey fan, you kind of become a hockey fan because the Knights are like almost like religion here now for the locals.
Definitely. Yeah, I've definitely become a fan. What's your favorite thing about Vegas?
Probably the ease of navigation, meaning like, I travel a good amount. And the airport's 15 minutes from my house, super easy to get in and out of.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things that I like. And not just for the fact that it's easy for me to get in and out, but it's also, we were kind of talking about this on the way here. There's always something happening in Vegas. There's always a reason that people are coming to Vegas. And as somebody who likes to connect with people, I like that. I like that. I'm from a town that nobody ever came to ever. You know what I mean? So if I ever wanted to go do something, I had to put it in my calendar. Whereas now there's just constant, every week it seems like somebody's, hey, I'm going to be in Vegas next week.
Right.
I want to grab a cup of coffee or grab a beer or grab some dinner or whatever, So it's just a great place to connect with people if you like to do that.
It's been the easiest place for me to build community, to find friends, to the amount of work opportunities that have opened up, the doors that have opened up. And I feel like there's this excitement, this buzz in Vegas, but like, especially for the locals, people want to connect with other locals and people are really down to network and connect. And when they say, hey, let's hang out or hey, let's get dinner, like what I've found here, at least for the most part, people really mean it. And you can actually follow up and like actually have dinner.
It's not just a small talk line that they used.
Yeah. And that's refreshing and has been nice and has been like made my transition out here super easy. And for you and I, given the space that we're in, because I haven't formally kind of introduced you to the show, like you're known for your networking, for your ability to connect with people. You run a top tier podcast called Travis Makes Friends. But before you got into this world, you were also a door-to-door salesman. We were talking about that before, sold kind of all the gamut.
All the above. Yep.
And now you're CEO and founder of Guestio, which is this booking platform that people can go and get high quality guests on their shows. Give me a little bit of background. I know I just did, but like, what's the earliest piece of context about you that I need to know to understand who you are and how you've become the man that you are today?
It's really always been for me equation of figuring things out, like being a problem solver. Because I think everybody could probably say this. Everybody that's in a position that you and I are in, where it's just kind of this kind of weird way that we figured out how to make a living. I think almost anybody would be able to say this, but I'm not supposed to be here. You know what I mean? I grew up in a small town, kind of a cult-like environment. I graduated kindergarten on the same campus I graduated college from.
Wow.
And 8th grade and high school.
Okay.
And it was where I went to church. So almost every hour of my day from the time that I was like 3 or 4 until the time that I was 21 was spent on this one like 40-acre campus inside of this super small religious circle. And I was, I went to the college on that campus, which is a purely ministerial Bible college. So I graduated with a double major in Bible and church ministries. And as soon as I graduated, kind of realized I didn't really want to do that. So now I had this useless degree. I always joke about it because it's like a Bible degree is already pretty useless. But when you take the fact that it was unaccredited, it's quite literally worth the piece of paper it's printed on in terms of its ability to get me a job or start a career at all. So when I graduated, I was just like, what are the options here? The options are like, go work for somebody I don't respect or like in some random work culture, making like $24,000 to $34,000 a year.
Yeah.
Or I can do the thing that I was doing in college that was making me some pretty good money, which was door-to-door sales. So that was just a fallback. It was just like, I know how to do this. It's 100% commission. So I kill what I eat what I kill. You know what I mean? Like I got to go out and make money. And if I don't go out, I don't make money. But if I do go out and I work harder than everybody else and get better than everybody else, then I can make more money than everybody else. So I really liked that it was flexible. I liked that it played to my strengths. I liked that it was competitive. So I worked, 20, 25 hours a week when I was 21, 22, doing 100% commission door-to-door sales. But that was the first year that I clocked 6 figures, was knocking doors, selling alarms. And then counterintuitively, after that year was done, I just kind of was like, this isn't it. Again, counterintuitively, I say, because most 22-year-olds making 6 figures in 20 hours a week are like, I'm never going to stop doing this.
Right.
But for me, it's just like a matter of looking into the future and seeing 32-year-old Travis. And I didn't want to continue doing that path at 32. Not to say that it's a bad path. I have a lot of friends that make great money in door-to-door and have been doing it for a couple decades and own companies and make really, really good money doing it. It was just, for me, I just didn't want to do it anymore. So kind of saw the writing on the wall. And for me, it's really difficult to continue doing something when I know that I'm not going to be doing it for a long time. Like, especially if it's 100% commission, I can't just go clock in and get my paycheck.
Right.
Like I have to work hard at making a sale.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can't just half-ass it and expect to get paid on Friday. So I was just really lost for a while. I had no idea what I wanted to do. My degree was useless for what I wanted to do. The thing that I was good at, which was door-to-door, wasn't helping me get any other jobs. I was applying to like corporate sales jobs and nobody would give me a job. Apparently I didn't know enough about how to present myself in a job interview to get a job from somebody. To me, looking back on it now, it's just like, well, these sales managers were just dumb. Like if I saw a 22-year-old kid that was making 6 figures, 100% commission door-to-door, and I was like, I'm going to give you a company car, insurance, and like a gas card and company leads, like this kid's going to kill it.
Yeah. Check.
Like, I don't know. To this day, it blows my mind that they didn't at least see some potential.
Right.
This young, ambitious, hungry homeowner with good credit as a 22-year, you know what I mean? It just, it was so weird to me now, even looking back on it. But at the time I was just like, that's just how it is.
Right.
I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I couldn't get a job anywhere. So I just kept doing door-to-door, just kind of moved to a different opportunity that paid me a little bit more money, and then dove into personal development because I was just trying to find something. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to make money. I don't know how I'm going to support my family. I don't know how it's all going to go down, but I know that I kind of want to be in this business entrepreneurship world. And I know I don't know anybody in that world at all right now. So I should probably start learning more about it. So I started watching YouTube videos and downloading some audiobooks and got a couple books, read through some of those, but my favorite medium was podcasting. I loved that I could listen to two people just have a conversation. I didn't have to like pay attention to every single thing that was being said. I could just have it on and be doing something else and still be just getting all of this amazing positive input into my brain. Plus, it was turning me on to new opportunities and different ways to make money that I had never thought of. So it was a really, really, kind of rock bottom time because I had no idea what I was going to do to make money, but it was also a fantastic time because it kind of reshaped my mindset and everything that I was thinking at the time. So after listening to enough podcasts, I was just like, this would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I started that.
It's so interesting because, like you, I started getting into this world of personal development through podcasting. And it's in that season of life where, like, I know I don't want to do what I'm currently doing, but I don't yet know what I want, what that looks like.
Yep.
And you're in that messy middle and things aren't crystal clear. And you're wondering, like, is this all going to make sense at some point? Because right now I'm just kind of wandering around in the dark and listening to things that inspire or motivate me, and I'm kind of taking note, but I still don't have a clear picture of how I'm going to make it in this world and what that's going to look like.
It feels almost odd because like your identity is moving forward without the results.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like your identity is like trying to be up here and be like you're, telling yourself all these things and you're dreaming about the future and you're thinking about all the things that you're going to accomplish, but like none of it's happened yet. So you feel this kind of that's I think why so many people fall into the imposter syndrome trap, because it's easy to believe it's easy to believe the lie of imposter syndrome when you're first getting started because you have no evidence to fall back on that you deserve to be where you say you're going to be going. And there's a lot of people in your life that don't believe in you, frankly, and will reinforce the negative thoughts that you have rather than reinforce the positive thoughts. There's a lot of people that are going to be rooting against you actively because you're a mirror of their deepest fears. And it doesn't make them feel good to see you chasing your dream. So they're kind of like in the shadows, hoping you fail a little bit. You know what I mean? There's just so many things that are in your way to prevent you from being successful. And it just feels so weird at the beginning.
Did you experience that when you started to make that transition, especially like away from Bible college and doing the traditional thing that, maybe was expected of you? I don't know if that was the case, but
it was
walking away from that and then choosing a completely different path into sales, but then out of sales into this completely unknown world of podcasting and media. What was that like for you from friends, family during that season of life where you were figuring it out?
Lonely. Frankly, it was a pretty lonely time because I was just transitioning completely away from everything that I knew growing up. Because when I say like, when I tell people I grew up in church, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I grew up going to church too. And it's like, no, I don't mean that. I mean, I grew up in church, like in the church. I was there all the time. We had church 3 services on Sunday, 1 service on Wednesday night. And then at school, which was on the same campus of the church, which I went to obviously Monday through Friday, we had chapel every other day and Bible class every other day. So it was Bible class, chapel, church, more church. Saturday we had soul winning, which is basically just inviting people to come to church. But before we go soul winning, they had what's called a soul winning rally, which is just a mini church service before you go soul winning and invite people to come to church.
It's like sales. It's like, we're going to do a sales team call.
Oh, it's literally what it is.
And then go out and recruit.
It's 100% what it is. Yeah. I mean, it was this, like when I did door to door, it was the same thing we would do because that's all it was. It was the church going out and doing door to door sales to invite people to come to church the next day. So quite literally Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I was there and in some sort of context in church or a service or a sermon or something. And so my teachers were my youth pastors, my youth leaders were my helpers, my Sunday school, like my friends, my church friends, my school friends were my sports friends. Everything was the same and in one place. That's why I describe it as a bubble. So coming out of that world, it's very taboo to like go to the school there and then not go into ministry. So just making the one decision to not go into ministry was already a difficult enough decision. But then to start like keep going down the path that I ended up going down, I just knew what was being said about me. And it was not like I would see text messages from friends of mine that I had known since I was 4 that were talking shit about me to other friends of mine that I also knew since I was 4. And it was just like, it was just such a weird thing because I didn't feel like I was a bad person or I was doing anything that was, atrocious or anything like that. It was just that I was selecting a different path and these people are actively like talking a bunch of crap. So yeah, it was a weird period because when I left that world, it was just kind of starting over, starting from scratch. That's why I think the networking and the relationship thing means so much to me because when I left all that, I quite literally was starting everything from scratch. I didn't really have a bunch of friends. I didn't know anybody who had any results that I wanted. I knew zero millionaires, no business owners. Like just didn't know anything or anybody that that would support the things that I was working on.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of like good friends that are more like brothers of mine who were in support of me, but they just couldn't help at all. They were
Right.
just kind of like, "Oh, that's cool. Hope it goes well." But I'm a construction worker, so like I can't put you on to opportunity or anything like that. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? There's not so yeah, it was a weird period because I didn't know how it was going to work out, and I didn't have anybody around me who knew it was going to work out. I just knew what I knew. I knew what I didn't want, and I knew the version of life that I wanted. I didn't know exactly the vehicle that would get me there, but I knew that I wanted like certain things on a checklist in my mind, like mostly freedom. I
Yeah.
wanted lifestyle freedom. I wanted to be able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want. And a big part of that equation is getting more money. And money is a huge part of freedom. So I had to kind of rework and rewire my mindset around what money was and that it was not an evil thing, that it was actually a good thing, a useful tool, as long as, you use it to amplify the version of yourself that you are, which is a good version of yourself. It's just a tool.
Right.
It's a neutral thing that you can use for good things or you can use it for bad things. And it doesn't in and of itself make you a bad person. So there's like so many things that were happening around my mindset at the time, around my belief system at the time, my values, my like everything was changing in my life for a complete 180 for 3 to 5 years from like 2021 to 24, 25.
Well, I
So many
think
things changed.
that's an important piece that I want people to hear because what you just said is this was not this took time. Like
Yeah.
you were in that kind of season for a minute.
Hmm.
And as soon as you start to do what you said, a reallocation of priorities, what values, belief systems, um, trying to expand your awareness, your consciousness, what's possible in your own, in your own worldview, that can very quickly lead to you becoming the black sheep in your community, especially if you're one of the only ones that is starting to do that.
Yeah.
And I actually got a message from one of my closest friends recently who I had a similar experience as you when I started my show, when I started to do what I really wanted to do and pursue my dreams outwardly. Um, she wasn't a fan and kind of sometimes talked shit about me and be like, oh, who does Tori think she is? She's trying to be an influencer. Look at her taking photos and like kind of bashed me and eventually kind of ghosted me
Mm.
completely. And I've never actually spoken about this publicly, but I think it's relevant to what you said because I recently have had a lot of success and there's more, people paying attention lately with the show and everything that's been happening online. And I get a long message from her. I haven't talked to her in years. And what she said to me was ultimately, I'm sorry. And I see that your growth actually triggered the part of me that was unwilling to grow at the
Mm.
time. And you're going for what you desired and you chasing your dreams. Like I see you living that now. And that has fully come into fruition for you. And I was afraid I would be left behind.
Yeah.
And
So
I
she
think
took herself out of the running.
right. And I think so often the people that love us, it's not that they don't care for us or love us or like even have, they want to see us succeed, but sometimes not at the expense of them not.
Yeah,
Right.
totally. Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it so, I guess, insidious or nefarious is that it's most of the time the people that love you the most that are even sometimes unknowingly holding you back from becoming the version of yourself that you need to become. And it's from this place of I love you and I care for you and I don't want to see you get hurt or get
Mhm.
hurt or get rejected or fail or be embarrassed. I don't want to see any of those things happen. So I'm going to try to protect you
Mhm.
and discourage you from heading down this path at all. But if you're going to do anything outside of the ordinary, it's just going to be part of the path.
Mhm.
There's going to be rejection. There's going to be failure. There's going to be embarrassment. There's going to be times you fall flat on your face. Like it's going to come. It's part of the package. It's
Yep.
not something you can get out or away from.
Mhm.
So you just got to kind of embrace it and then do your best to mitigate the time that you spend with people who are uh, being more negative. I
Mhm.
guess I'm trying to say it a little bit differently because it's not like a place of negativity. Like I hope
Intentionally.
you fail.
Right.
It's just like I really don't want to see you fail, especially like
Mhm.
if it's your parents. Just that stuff like that. It's their job to keep you safe. They've been doing it since you were 0 years old. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So to see you just go out on your own and try this new thing that's completely out of the realm of anything they've ever heard of, especially our generation where it's like this thing online and your parents don't even really understand what TikTok is. You know
Right.
what I mean? And it's like, what are you doing? How exactly is this going to translate into money?
Mhm.
Are you making any, like, do you need a loan? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like they just don't understand it. It's not a matter of wanting to see you fail. They just don't get it.
Yeah, and unintentionally, I think they're oftentimes in those situations, they're projecting their own fears onto you. And
Yeah.
what it's saying is like, stay in this box,
Yeah.
keep doing what you've done. Like, there is a path, just follow the path that we
Mhm.
all do. And like, we're okay,
Yeah.
and like, we want you to be okay. But what they're saying is just like, continue to conform
Mhm.
because it makes us feel safe and it makes us feel like we've done our jobs to
Yeah.
take care of you. And when you start to kind of rebel or revolt or in that way, which doing and honoring what's true for you is an act of rebellion
Mhm.
in a world that tells you to be like everybody else.
Yeah, I actually reshared a post today from Mark Manson, who's a
Love him.
favorite, one of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
Really good dude. Um, I want to, I need to bring him back on my show actually, because yeah, a lot has happened since the last time we talked. But anyway, I shared a post from him today because it said something about you have to get comfortable with people's disapproval. It's
Mhm.
not even a matter of like remaining neutral about it. It's you have to be okay with people's disapproval if you want to do anything big, because it's just part of the path. And
Mhm.
there's so many people that never get out of that. And that was kind of some conversations that I had with people from the world that I grew up in early on. Cause now I'm 30, so all the people that I went through that entire world with, we're all about this, we're obviously still the same age. And there's so many more of them that have ended up where I am now, just took them years after it took me. You know
Right.
what I mean? Where they were, I don't know, further indoctrinated or less willing to give it up, I guess. I don't know, but they're kind of realizing like, oh, Travis isn't actually crazy. I actually agree with some of the things that Travis says now, or I've had people reach out to me now and be like, "Thank you for showing an example of what it takes to leave this world, because
Yeah.
I want to myself, but I don't know how."
Mhm.
And it seems like you've forged a pretty good path. And I guess my point in saying all of that is just to say that if, like, at some point they also got comfortable with the disapproval. It was just that I did it as soon as I left, which
Mhm.
is rare, because you're right on the tail end of all those belief systems, and
Mhm.
to rewire everything in your brain takes a long time for a lot of people. So yeah, there that concept of you just got to be okay with people's disapproval, because that's the conversation that I have with other friends of mine that I had 4 or 5 years ago that are now like kind of coming over to my side of and viewing things the way that I view
Yeah.
things. And it's never, by the way, I never disparage anybody for what they believe, and I wish everybody the best with their belief system. But when people are coming to me and asking me questions about it, I'm just completely honest about what I think.
Mhm.
And you can make a decision whether or not you believe me or believe that or believe whatever you want to believe. I frankly don't care. This is just what I believe.
Right.
And so I've had these conversations with these people who I know are still in that world because they're seeking approval
Mhm.
from the church leaders, from the pastors, from the staff, or they're seeking approval from their parents. And the worst ones are friends of mine whose parents were also the staff members, where
Right.
it's like they're, the VPs of the college or whatever, and
Mhm.
and they're friends of mine that I grew up with. And it's just like, at some point, you're gonna have to make decisions for you,
Yeah.
not for your parents, not for the church staff, not for anybody else, but for you and what's right for you, and what's right for your family. And nobody else is going to know what that is except for you. That's
Mhm.
kind of the point of being you.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So what allowed me to kind of free myself from it was that I looked to that as like, what's the logical conclusion? The logical conclusion is, at some point I'm going to get sick of living my life for other people. So at
Mhm.
some point I'm going to do the things that I'm going to want to do, or I'm just going to be spiteful and angry for the rest of my life. So like, spiteful, angry version of me, that's not a version I'm okay with. So the other version is maybe going to just tolerate this for a little bit longer. But at some point, I'm going to stop tolerating it, and I'm going to be like where I want to be. So if that's where I'm going to end up in a decade, I may as well just start doing that now.
Right.
You know?
Well, you bring up so many important points. One, that in order to do this, you have to give up the need to be liked by everybody so that you can be loved by the people who really do know you. And that is a big,
Your people.
big hurdle to get over,
Mhm.
especially when we are so attached to pleasing and being liked and being accepted, which we all have this innate need to belong. And you've always belonged to this community and this church and this family of whatever your family of origin and culture is. And there's a way of doing things. And you also brought up a second and very important point, which is that is absolutely critical and necessary, which is learning to think for yourself.
Yes.
Outside of those that have thought for you or come before you, where you just are playing follow the leader. And you're just like, okay, I'm doing what's expected. And it's interesting that now people are sort of looking to you for guidance and being like, oh, you have paved this way that we didn't see before.
Yeah.
Because you were willing to be the one, to be the leader, to do it for yourself. Now there's a groove, a path that people can see. It's like, oh, it's not that scary. It's not that bad.
Well, and coming from that world, part of kind of the indoctrination, what they teach you is that if you leave this path, then the only other path is like wrought with misery and sin and evil, and you're going to be miserable, and you're going to end up coked out in an alley,
right,
giving blowjobs for a dime bag. You know what I mean? Like it's just not. You know what I mean? And so when people look at me now, it's more like, hey, you're providing a third option that we didn't know existed. We thought it was like good versus evil, like God versus Satan, and we're actually kind of figuring out that like, oh, you can kind of go down this third path, and Travis seems to be doing okay going down that path. And I think that's also why still a good amount of people who want to see me fail because they know that it's kind of a more hopeful version of leaving that path. You know what I mean? So now it was funny the other day, a buddy of mine reached out, and his younger sister still goes to the school and she's a senior. And he was telling me that there was a girl in their class that got suspended because she listened to one of my podcast episodes and like said something to one of the authority or the teachers or principals or something. And yeah, it was enough to get her suspended from school. And I was just like, what a weird place to be where like,
I'm the catalyst.
Right. Well, also like if you believe you have the truth, then information shouldn't scare you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you genuinely believe we have the truth and it's 100% true, then you shouldn't be trying to silence any additional information, especially when it's not coming from a place of like, I hope to persuade everybody to follow my lead. I genuinely want everybody to follow their own path. But that's the problem, is that I think most people will never, ever follow their own path because they never take the time to question why they are the way they are, why they believe the things they believe, why they're on the path that they're set on to begin with. And if it's even one that they want to be on, there's just so many people that never examine any of those things and never look at those things. So they just continue life with all of the things that they were told growing up and thinking all that's true. And it's like, for me, it doesn't make any logical sense, because like, what are the odds that you were right? What were the odds that you were raised 100% correct? That there's nothing that you have to learn, that there's no opinions that you currently hold that are completely incorrect. Like, what are the odds that happened?
Right.
Very, very, very low. There's a lot of people in the world. You know what I mean? Like you just think that you were born into this. And I did. To answer my own question, at the time, I did. Yeah. Right. I thought I was 100% correct on everything. You know what I mean? And
isn't that so fascinating? Because I also grew up in the church. I thought I was going to go into ministry full time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And it's interesting because as I have grown, as I've questioned life, as I've questioned my path and really dug into what do I believe and why do I believe it? Not because anybody told me, but like, why is this true for me? Yeah. And I thought I was going to do ministry full time. And it wasn't until I got into personal development that I realized there was like you were saying, a third option. And I think it's easy to demonize the thing we don't know and to see it as bad and wrong. And now you're giving people an alternative, but a lot of times illuminating that alternative as being a positive one, certain people don't like that because one, it brings awareness to the fact that there is another option. which doesn't keep, because if their option and their way of doing things is the only good or right, positive way to lead to a good life, then they can control you and they can keep you there.
Absolutely.
And so providing people with another option is dangerous for them. And yet I think people are desperate for possibility. I think people, when we know and we've been indoctrinated only into thinking one way, when you have that spark of curiosity and you are gravitating towards, you hear something you say or something I say and you're like, that's interesting. I'm curious about that. And you start to follow it. That's that path that most people, I mean, hopefully more these days are following because of people like you, where it's like, actually, it's okay.
At least just becoming aware that it's an option.
Right.
That's the thing to me, is like, go down whatever path you want to go down, but don't make the mistake of thinking that the only way to be happy or the only way to find fulfillment
or be a good person
or be a good person or whatever.
Yeah.
To have success is this one path. And if I veer from this, I'm not going to have it. It's just not true.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately kind of were really big things for me, is that I got out into the real world and I experienced things and saw evidence of things that were contrary to the entire foundational belief system I built my whole life on.
Yeah.
And it was impossible to ignore once I saw it. You know, I call it the crack in the dam. It was like the initial crack,
the glimmer
in the
of
dam.
light.
Yeah, where it's just like a little bit of water starts trickling and you're like, I didn't think that was possible, but here it is right in front of me. Can't deny it. You know what I mean? So then another crack happens.
Yep.
Another one's, few years later, and the whole dam breaks, and you know what I mean? And kind of, and for me anyway, I'd basically changed almost everything about myself.
Yeah, very, very similar to my life and my story as well. So I deeply resonate. And something one of my first mentors and coaches used to say, which I still use, is like, the whole saying ignorance is bliss is so true, because as soon as she says ignorance is bliss and awareness is a bitch. Because when you start to see it, you can't unsee it. When you start to become aware that, oh, maybe this isn't the only way to be happy, or maybe this, you start to find truth in these other places that you didn't think truth existed, then you can't, it's like turning on a light that you can't turn off.
Yeah, right.
And now it's looking at you, and it's like there's this call that's like,
that you can't ignore.
You can't ignore. And if you do, that is a very an existence that is pretty miserable, because you just try to numb that voice.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where I got to, is like, I know that I'm just going to be spiteful.
Yeah.
I'm going to hate everybody who tried to keep me in this box. So again, that's not a version of life that works for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the spiteful guy full of hate that's regretting everything and makes everybody around him miserable. It's just not going to be me. So I have to follow this path, even though I have no idea where it's going to lead, and I don't know how it's going to work, and I don't know all the ins and outs and everything in between, but I know that this step feels good. So I should just maybe go after the next step.
I love that. Well, and it's led to some pretty successful places. I do want to just say, you've been in circles and know people in high places. You've made some really good friends along the way. You are the epitome of somebody who knows how to build connections and network, and there's so many benefits to that. But you already mentioned Mark Manson. We were talking about somebody who wrote The Third Door, Alex, recently, who was on your show, and other people that you have interviewed are, at the top of my list. People like Shaquille O'Neal, Rob Dyrdek, Dean Graziosi, Ed Milet. It's like the guys that are doing it at the highest level across industries. Okay, you've obviously made it on this path. You've carved a path for yourself. How did relationship building, obviously as a salesperson, you realized the importance of that, but where did you start to double down on connections that you were building? And how did that start to pave a way for the work in the podcast that you do now? What was your journey with getting into circles with people that you wanted to be around? Yeah,
it was relationships and connecting with people has been kind of the cornerstone of everything that I've built. And I kind of happened my way into it, to be honest with you, because when I was starting my podcast, I didn't know a lot, obviously, but I knew one thing. I knew that the riches are in the niches. And I knew that I had to niche down. I had to pick a topic, and it couldn't be this generic entrepreneurship thing. And so I was going to do it on sales, because I was like, I'm a sales guy. I'll do one on sales. So I go to iTunes, I type in sales, and I was like, oh, there's only 1,200 podcasts that talk about how to sell stuff. And from really great, like Grant Cardone level people that have been teaching this for 30 years. Like me as a 24-year-old door-to-door sales guy, I'm going to come in and like take market share there. Like just didn't seem to be a viable option. So I was like, besides selling, what's like the other like skill set that I believe that you have to master in order to be extremely successful? And it was networking. It was building relationship capital with people. And so since it was also scratching my own itch, because I kind of mentioned I was basically starting my network from scratch, it was like, I also want to learn how to do this better. So I took the position, and that's one thing I've mentioned to people who are starting podcasts. It's just like, you don't have to be the expert to start a podcast about something. You just have to be curious about it. And you can kind of be, what I tell people is like, I wasn't at the destination, like calling back to people and trying to get them to come find me at the destination. That wasn't my journey as a podcaster. I was the captain of the ship. And I was just like, hey, everybody, jump on board. We're headed this way. We're all going to learn how to build better relationship capital and stuff like that through this podcast. And that's eventually what it did for me. What I didn't realize at the time was that the podcast itself would become like the number one tool that I could use to connect with people. But that kind of played out over time. It was like 3 years into it, because people, my show was called Build Your Network for 800 episodes in 5 years. So when people would have me on the show, we talk about networking and we talk about relationship building, all this other stuff. And they would ask me like, what's your number one networking tip? And I would always like come up with something a little bit more philosophical, like something about adding value or giving without expecting something in return or something like that. And then I kind of started realizing over the years, I was like, actually, my number one tip is start a freaking podcast, because it's the number one way that I've used to connect with people that I have no business connecting with. So it just kind of turned into this wheel that kind of kept feeding itself, where it was like the podcast was about networking. So I was learning about networking and building relationships from the best people to do it. And then I would use the information that they were teaching me and telling me to go build my own network and make it more efficient. And then I would connect with those people, and then those people would give me advice, and then I would use that advice and I'd go do that, so it's kind of like this thing that kept feeding itself over time. And that's what led to, a lot of the different people that I've had on my show now over the years. It's all been a result of just really trying to focus on building relationships, because it was such a pain point in my life. It was like, I didn't know any millionaires. It's like, how do you become a millionaire if you don't know any millionaires? Like you can do it, but the path might be longer, more difficult, more arduous.
Yeah.
You're accepting obstacles that you do not need to accept if you just go try to do it by yourself.
Right.
So instead of doing it by myself, I was just like, oh, let me see how many people can I go connect with that have done this, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt a dozen times, because they could probably help me learn a lot faster than me and Google. You know what I mean?
I mean, early on, like, what does the practicality of that look like day to day? Like when you don't have a network and you're starting from scratch, how do you get someone to give you the time of day?
So for me, it was starting with an industry that I wanted to be well connected in, which for me at the beginning was podcasting, specifically in the business podcasting world. So the shows that I knew of at the time were like, the regular ones, Lewis Howes and Bigger Pockets and Jordan Harbinger and a couple of these other ones. But the one that I listened to that finally encouraged me to start a podcast was John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneur on Fire.
Yep.
He has a massive show, and he's been doing it for over a decade now. And he just has this really cool automated business that makes him $2 million, $3 million a year, something like that, on 75 to 85% net profit margins, which is insane. And he would publish his income reports. And it was the first time I looked at his income reports. I was like, how did this dude make $340,000 last month with a podcast? I just had no idea that was possible. And so he had a free podcast course. I took it and decided like, hey, I'm going to start this podcast thing. So he, at the end of it, goes like, hey, if you need a coach, reach out to me. So I reached out to him, and he made an introduction to a podcast coach, Jeff Brown from Read to Lead podcast, who became my podcast coach. And then John was also putting a mastermind on at his house in Puerto Rico, like 2-3 months after that. And that was like, it was a huge decision for me to go to that. It was 6 people total. But I knew that I wanted to build some sort of a connection with John, because he, again, was like, he was the person that I was using as like the example to follow.
Right.
And I knew that the relationship with him was more important than the information that he could give me. So when I went to that event, it was, first of all, a really difficult decision, because up to this point, like I had my podcast coach that John also recommended me. And then I bought like books and audiobooks. That was all I'd ever done.
Right.
So this mastermind was 3 days at his house and it was $6,500 plus travel to get down to Puerto Rico to go to this thing. So I was like, man, this is going to be like an $8,000 weekend. And at the time, I was still doing door to door sales,
Mm.
and it was a huge decision to try to go do that. But I ended up making that decision, and then I again realized at the very beginning of it that like the information is going to be good while I'm here, but also the number one thing that I want to walk away from, like my number one intention is to like find a way to continue a relationship with John because it was not a continuity based thing, So I guess where I'm going with this is like identify the industry you want to be well connected in because it's important, I think, at first to stay within a certain industry because it's much easier to continue making contacts once you have one good contact. So like once I knew John knew everybody else in that space, the Pat Flynn's and Amy Porterfields and the Lewis Howes, like all the other people that I wanted to connect with. John already had a connection to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like finding that like kind of, anchor in the space and then paying to play. I paid to get in front of him. And I think that's super underrated. Depending on what circles you run in, some people frown on it for some reason. I just look at it as like, you know what? That person earned the right to charge for their time and I should be totally happy to pay the price that they put on their time.
Right.
Because it's just simple supply and demand. If your time is in demand, then it's worth more money. And I don't know how to explain that to people that just don't get that concept. That's just the way that it is. So I paid to play and I got to his house. And then while I was there, I think this is kind of the thing that I did differently was that while I was there, I focused on the relationship rather than the information. So when I was there, I looked for a way that I could add value to John, even though like it was super difficult because I'm younger, I'm less experienced, I don't have near as much money, no influence, didn't have any connections. Like how can I possibly add value to this relationship other than just paying you for being here, right? So when I was there, I actually, it's a funny story. I bought this drone. It was like when drones were getting really big, 5-6 years ago. And I was going to like provide footage because I did a bunch of videography and photography in college and stuff just to make extra money. So I was bringing my camera and I bought this drone. I was like, I know what I'll do to give value is I'll take some really cool pictures of their beautiful home with my drone and all this other stuff. And I'll give it all to them so that they could use it for marketing this event later on. And I was like, I'll do all that for free,
Yeah.
So I get to Puerto Rico and I'd never flown the drone except for one time outside of my house, but my house was next to a Northrop. So it was literally in a restricted airspace.
Okay.
So as soon as the drone got up in the air, the controller like landed the drone for me because I was in restricted airspace.
Oh, wow. So it can like sense that it's out of
right.
boundaries. So it'll just like powering off like my brain did
Yep.
earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It just like landed back down. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not practicing here.
Yeah.
So we get to Puerto Rico. I throw it up the first night on the roof of the condo complex we're staying at with the other attendees. And then when I was landing it, I thought that the landing was way more automated than it was, and it wasn't. So when I was trying to land this thing and one of the propellers caught like a plant in the corner of the rooftop and it just smashed the drone into the side of the thing. 2 of the propellers broke and it only came with 1 replacement. So I was like, well, there goes all my hopes and dreams of adding additional value here. And so, and then of course, one of the people I was with like told John, it was like this whole embarrassing thing instead of this cool thing. It was like, oh shit,
Dang.
And, but then like the next day, he said he was going to be at this conference and then he had a guy that was like an intern that was just volunteering to sell journals because he has the Freedom Journal, Mastery Journal, Podcast Journal, a couple different journals that John wrote. And this guy was going to be working his booth at the event and selling journals there. And he was like, can you stop by the booth and just like, because obviously we talked about my sales experience because that was all that I did at the time. And he was like, can you stop by the booth and give him a few pointers on how to sell these things, And I was like, bro, I'll just work the booth for you. So I volunteered 3 days of my time. I paid for my own travel, my own hotel, went to the event, represented him and sold journals like a salesperson that I was for 3 full days, which if I had done that selling the product that I was selling at the time, I could have made 10, 15 grand if I sold a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But I was there volunteering my time for free just to build a relationship with John. So then we did well at that event and he asked me to come to his next event that he was speaking at like 2 or 3 months later. And it happened to be this guy, Cole Hatter. I don't know if you know Cole, but he has an event called Thrive. Actually, I think that might be done now, but they did it for 7 or 8 years. Pretty big entrepreneurial event, over 1,000 people that would be there. I think they got close to 2,000 a couple of years ago. But John was speaking there, and he invited me to come sell journals at that event. So I go to that event with John. John introduced me to like all these other people. I ended up joining Cole's mastermind. That's how I met like Dan Fleischman, and that's how I got and connected with all these other people. And then I joined that mastermind. And then, yeah, so it was a matter of like continuing to work the connections I was getting. I think like I said, getting the industry down first, finding an anchor in the industry, building a really great relationship with that individual or maybe a couple of individuals where you're just consistently and constantly adding value without ever asking for anything. I wasn't asking John for anything at the time.
Right.
Just like, how can I help? What
Right.
can I do? Like, what can I do to continue adding value to a relationship? And then he would just out of his own pocket kind of reciprocate sometimes. And then eventually that's how I actually started making my first like dollars online. Was I started a mastermind, which was like super, super small and tiny and wasn't really making me any money because I was spending the money that they were paying me on making sure that it was a good experience for them. But when I was able to finally leave door to door, it was because I started doing podcast coaching. And I convinced John to send the referrals that he was referring to other people to me. Because I was like, first of all, I'm going to charge more. Second of all, I'm going to pay you a referral on them. And so when I charge more, you're going to get, or no, I actually negotiated the referral fee down because he was taking like 50% or something of like a one-on-one coaching, which is a pretty big deal. So I was like, if I'm going to do it, it's got to be 30%. I'm not going to do 50%, but I'll raise the price of the coaching. So you'll make just as much money. And you know that I'm going to sell more people because I'm a good salesperson.
Right.
So he started funneling leads to me, like free leads to me for podcast coaching. And that was how I was able to finally like start making a decent enough living to stop doing door to door and go full time into the like online world.
Man, this is so good and juicy. And I'm so glad you shared that because you really just gave people the outline for how you really moved out of the sales world into this and through strategic relationships. And I really related to your story around what do I give somebody? How can I bring value to somebody who technically in my eyes has it all and doesn't need anything from me, right? You're like, what do I have to offer? And I know people that are listening to the show are probably like, yeah, there's somebody they want to get close to and be in proximity with that they have identified could help them in some way. But they're like, I don't even know how to do that. Why would they give me the time of day? And you really just hit the nail on the head. It was just like, what can I do that would just be a little bit like, you thought outside the box for sure. Like, I'm not just going to go and expect this person to just give. It's that like,
even though I paid them to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, how can I show up and give and see then with the expectation that I'm going to give and not just because I want to receive, but just because I want to connect.
Well, it's the commitment to long term is really like what allows you to make the adjustment or the shift in your mind to go from being like a taker or a matcher to being a true giver. Is you just have to commit and believe that long term it's going to benefit me somehow, some way down the road, but I'm not going to expect anything from it right now. It's just like I'm just here to help,
right?
But if you're not committed to the long term, like that, the people that are in it for 6 months just to see if it works, they quit. Because you can't build a close relationship with those types of people within 6 months. It's just not how it works.
Well, that's not how trust is built.
Exactly. It's not how any relationship's built, but especially not a relationship with somebody whose time is in high demand. It's even more difficult in those situations. So you have to have patience and you have to be committed to just like, I know that I'm committed to being successful long term. So the only way to solve for that is to think about the version of me in 10 years from now, not the version of me in 6 months from now. And so you like the constant giving without expectation is the only way, if you really examine it, it's the only way to be successful long term.
Yeah.
Like it's not even just like one, like it's just like you can't be this taker. You can't be transactional. You're just going to burn through relationships and you're always going to be on this hamster wheel of having to create new connections and relationships all the time because your brand is sullied. Your name is no good. Your reputation is bad. You burn bridges wherever you go. So like, that's why you see people who are still at the networking event when they're 64 selling insurance because they didn't treat people well their whole career. And they think the only way to make money is to burn and turn.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like, well, because you're only thinking about next week.
Right.
You're not thinking about 3 years from now.
Well, and it's a selfish mentality or approach to have, but I think it's interesting because you had this foresight to be able to like see 10 years down the road. But also, I'd imagine though, like when you're investing to go to that weekend in Puerto Rico, you also can't know what investing in that weekend was going to do for you long term.
Yes.
Even though you were thinking long term, there's no way for you to know, oh, because as a result of coming here and doing this thing and trying to do the drone and carrying, enough to stay 3 days and sell at his booth, then he's going to invest in me and he's actually going to give me these referrals and then I'm going to be able to leave my job. Like,
Had no
you
idea.
can't connect those dots.
And to put a bow on the whole story too, when I started my software company, he was one of the first investors in the software company and is an advisor in the company and wrote me a 6-figure check for that business.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, because I was adding it up one time, and this is before I had my company. I was like, between the referral fees I've paid to John for people he sent me, the coaching I've paid for personally, the masterminds and everything, I was like, I've paid like 30 grand to this dude in the last like 2.5 years. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But he was always very helpful and wanted to see me succeed. I think he appreciated that I wasn't expecting a ton of his, like, even after I paid him a bunch of money, I was like, I need help on this certain thing. Can I pay you for like one-off coaching call? He was like, it's $1,000. And I was like, okay, done. You know what I mean? But I never came in with this expectation where it's just like, but I already paid you once.
Right.
Like, now you owe me everything for the rest of my life, right? That's how it works. You know, it's just like, I think people grow tired of those types of expectations that people have of them. And I was always willing to be the person just to add value where I could. And like I said, when I started the software company, I think he took notice of those things and was willing to be like, hey, this is a really good idea, but also I trust you. So yeah, wrote me a 6-figure check to invest in my company.
I think this is the power of really investing in relationships. And when I say investing is like, it's like going deep, not wide, right? Because you can like be friendly or have an acquaintance or say you've met someone once, like with a ton of people.
Yeah.
But like specifically with this relationship, you went deep. And in the sales world, because I come from the sales world too, I was outside sales and then did sales training for a sales operations group. And we could go out and I could train the sales team to go and just sell a product and it be a transaction. Or you can teach someone to go out and build a relationship.
Yeah.
And then it's like, how sticky can we get? If I have 5 products, I could sell you. But then I sit down with you for 30 minutes and realize only 2 of my products are relevant to what you do. You can either try to get them for all they're worth and be like, I'm going to sell you all 5 things and get out. Or I can say, hey, you know what? After talking to you, I only think 2 of the things that we do might actually be helpful for you. So I think it's not a good time to it's a waste of our time to talk about these things. That person immediately has rapport and trust with you that they didn't before. And now they're probably more likely to be interested in your other products simply because.
And tell their friends about them.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, how can I get sticky with this person?
Yeah.
Not just have this transaction of, okay, you got this thing from me and then I'm on to the next. Because ultimately this one relationship has completely transformed your life and business and had a big impact on it.
And then that was kind of the process that I kept duplicating. Whenever I had some, like Dan Fleischman's a great example. He's somebody that I just respect a lot. I love the way he builds his businesses. I like the way that I like his philosophy. I love how much of a giver and connector he is. There's just a lot of things that I like about him. So I wanted to connect with him. So I joined his mastermind. That one was $100 grand. I did it 2 years in a row. It's like when I look back at the last 6 years, it's been like $400,000 or something that I've invested directly into me. And like I said, some people might frown on the pay to play for relationships thing, but it's like, I never look at it like paying for a relationship. I look at it as paying for an opportunity to create a relationship. That's all it gives.
Guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed at all. There's a lot of people that come into groups like that. Again, especially when you get to the higher price, when you get to like the higher price tags like that, like you're paying $100K for a group, the expectations are through the roof on what you're going to receive from this group. It's like, I paid $100K, I better get this and this and this, and I better get that, and I better get this thing. And like you become this like this vacuum of value where you just want to suck all the value out of everything that you can possibly get, instead of coming into the group and changing your mindset into how do I add value. And it's really weird to do that when you're the one that paid that much money to be in there. But like I said, the goal for me when I jump into rooms like that is to leave the room with real relationships and friendships. And obviously the friendships with the people in the group is much more attainable because when you go to the events, they're not running around making sure the event's going really well. But through the years, that's what's allowed me to create close good relationships, a lot of people in that group, in the 100 Million Mastermind group, which has led to business in several different businesses that I have. It's led to different business partnerships, and it's like it's completely multiplied every time I've made one of those decisions to just invest on a high level back into myself. And at the beginning, it was really, really scary. You know, I threw it all on a 0% credit card when I first started. I filled up, it was a $42,000 credit limit,
Wow.
and it was 0% interest. And I filled it up with coaching, masterminds, my website, uh, travel, events, going to events, hotels, flights, all of it for investing directly into me. But by the end of that zero interest period, which I think was like 12 to 18, I think maybe 18 months, I think it was a Chase Freedom Unlimited. It was a personal card. It wasn't even a business card, which was a mistake that I learned at the time. If you're getting credit cards, put it in an LLC because it doesn't go against your personal credit.
Right.
But anyway, I filled up that card, $42,000. But before I ever paid a dime in interest, I paid off the whole card with income from the business that I was building. It's just, it was a big risk. And I hesitate to say that sometimes on podcasts because I don't want people to go out and pull out a credit card and make dumb decisions. But to me, it was like I was never buying new equipment and getting myself a MacBook and like, you know, I wasn't spending my money on like fun, frilly like television gaming systems type things that I could have convinced myself I needed for my business.
Right.
I had a $60 USB microphone for the first 3 years of my podcast. You know what I mean? With a Zoom or Skype.
Yep. Me too.
That was it.
Me too.
So but I was 40 grand in on events and hotels and masterminds and relationships and like all these other things, which are the real things that are going to make sure that you actually have a business and a way to continue making money in the next 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So it was always a factor of like how to, like, once it worked, once the first time worked, where it was like, oh, I connected with John, we've hung out. Now I get invited to this event in Australia. I'm a speaker at this event in Australia at a podcasting event, and like all the other we had a speakers retreat afterwards, and I find myself hanging out. That's with Pat Flynn and Jordan Harbinger and all these other people that are like big names in that podcasting world. And now I'm just hanging out with me and my wife and like 8 or 9 other of these speakers because I met this one person who did this thing, who invited me to this thing, and I went to it. And I flew all the way to Australia for the first time to watch John speak and connect with podcasters that were there. And then that connected me to the event host who invited me back as a speaker the next year because he saw that my podcast was going well. It was just every single piece of that was just like, oh, this actually worked. So why don't I try doing that again and then again and then again? Yep. And then, you know, the network just continues to expand because it becomes easier to add value once you become a more valuable individual.
Right.
Now it's like I can add more value to John in a single email introduction than I could with 3 days of my time 5 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So much easier when you start building valuable connections and becoming, like I said, a person of value. Your network will always increase in direct proportion to the amount of value that you can add to others.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's always so important to continue working on yourself as well.
Yeah. And I think just one other piece that you brought up there is to not get hung up on the wrong things, like needing the perfect equipment or the right studio or like to get started. It's just get started.
Yep.
Get started and follow the breadcrumbs.
Yes.
It's like when this person introduced me to this person or this person recommends this book, go read it. You know what I mean? I believe that's the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, like dripping you these breadcrumbs is just like keep just doing the next right thing.
Totally. That's all you can see.
Yeah.
Is the next step.
The next step.
You know?
And you can't, even though you can be thinking 10 years ahead, you don't necessarily have the foresight for how all of those breadcrumbs are going to link together until you're looking backwards. And you now are telling the story and it all makes sense why you needed to go meet this person in order to get to this relationship, in order to have this experience and gain this skill. You can only connect the dots looking backwards.
Yep. That's Steve Jobs nailed it on that speech for sure. I think that the dots are only joined looking back. It's just it's the only way. It's the only way to do it is you just got to take the first step and not know how it's going to unfold. That's why I have like when I picture myself in 5 or 10 years, it's rarely like specific to a certain task.
Yeah.
It's more like, what do I want my life to look like? So I have a doc. It's called in 5 years. And it just describes my ideal day in 5 years. Where am I waking up? What am I looking at when I wake up? What's the view that I have? Am I drinking coffee? Like I try to picture everything in my life that I want to have there. But I also know like it is almost useless to try to think of the exact way that it's going to happen. Even though like I'm going to picture my life how I want, and then reverse engineer the work that's going to take to get that,
Right.
with also remaining change ready, while also remaining at the same time saying like, okay, well, this path is kind of closing before me. So why don't I just kind of like alter and go
Mhm.
down this path and see where that leads?
Just
you
being
know?
adaptable to
Yes.
things as they unfold. Absolutely. I mean, this is why you're such a high value person and you hang out with so many high value people, why you have so many friends, why you have the show and the success that you do. I'm just curious, given that you have talked to some of the best in the business, who were there any people that you were just like so excited to interview or talk to? And who are they? And was there anybody that you met that surprised you and wasn't who you thought they would be or how you thought they would be?
So it's funny because I used to not have a good answer for this question, and then I interviewed Shaq, and now he's my answer to that question every single time that it's asked, because it wasn't just like a cool thing because it's Shaq and everybody knows who he is, and he's obviously a big personality, and there's plenty of things to talk about. It was that he was my childhood hero. Like he was painted on the wall in my room growing up.
Wow.
You know, I had pictures and bobbleheads and plaques and jerseys and everything with Shaq because I was a big basketball fan. And I was in LA County. I grew up in LA County. So the Lakers were my team, and the 2000, 2001 kind of Shaq Kobe Lakers were my team. And so when me and my friends would play basketball outside, it was like my buddy would be Kobe and I would be Shaq. You know what I mean? So when I got the opportunity to talk with him, it was just like a complete, really cool full circle moment because I had looked forward to a conversation with Shaq since I was like 7. So that one's an easy one now to answer. The was there anybody that surprised me? Yes, but never in like a really negative way. It was just kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But it never, there wasn't ever one where I like reached out to somebody that was like really well known and we had a conversation and I was like, well, that sucked.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I take that back. There was one. There was one that like it's almost kind of like well known. I'm not going to say his name, but it was kind of well known in the podcast. There's like inner circle of podcasters that had interviewed this guy, and I like reached out to them after I did it, and they all totally agreed with me.
Had the same
Yeah, had
experience.
the same exact experience. But he's a famous business author that has like I said, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but that one was like what did we even just talk about? Like,
Right.
did you even hear my question? Like, are you even hello?
Right.
You there?
Are the lights on?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was odd to say the least. So yeah, that was an interesting one. But the majority of them would just be surprising in a way that like, oh, we took the conversation somewhere I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess just to wrap this conversation up, because you've given so much valuable advice and just perspective for the person that's, where you and I were at the beginning of our journeys, or maybe they're a little bit further along, but they haven't yet seen the results kind of fully come to fruition. And they're wondering, should I keep doing this? Should I keep investing? Like, I feel like I've been trying. I feel like I've been putting one foot in front of the other, but like their big opportunity hasn't come yet, or they haven't gotten that break or had that big revenue month or whatever it is. Like, what do you say to those people who are like, yeah, that sounds great. And I'm so glad you made it and things have worked out for you, but they're in a season of self-doubt.
Yeah. I never try to get people to have the same dreams that I have. So that being said, my number one piece of advice is always try to go get more clarity, increase your level of self-awareness and ask yourself, is this what I want? If you're like, sometimes if you're feeling extremely burnt out, it's just because you're not aligning with who you really want to become. And you're chasing this version of success that isn't meant for you. Like you're climbing a mountain that you don't want to climb. And that to me is a pretty poor case scenario is if you work on something for a really long time because you feel like that's what you should be working on. And you climb up this mountain, you get to the peak and you're like, I actually wanted to be on the top of that mountain,
Right.
not this mountain. So sometimes you might just be climbing the wrong mountain. And it's worth just taking a step back and getting some clarity around, I'll just go spend time by myself is what I do.
Yeah.
Luckily I have a really understanding and supportive wife who allows me to take off sometimes just for like a day or two by myself, keeps the kids at home. And I just get up by myself. I smoke a cigar I try to, for me, it's like smoking a cigar with a really good view. I think really well. When I'm just like enjoying a good view, smoking a cigar and thinking by myself, not with my friends. I'm not on social media. I'm talking about you being with you. And by the way, if you can't do that, or if that sounds daunting, then that's a really big issue, and probably is the underlying problem of why you're not getting what you want, because you don't have a good relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
If you can't spend a time alone with yourself without having to get on social media or calling somebody or talking to somebody else, it's an indication that you are not okay with the version of you that you currently are. There's something that you don't trust yourself. So you don't even like spending time with you. And if you don't like spending time with you, how do you expect anybody else to like spending time with, to like, actually want to spend time with you? So that's like kind of like base level.
Baseline.
Because when somebody gave me that advice when I was 21 or 22, I was like, you're out of your mind.
Mhm.
An entire day by myself. It wasn't, what would I do? I don't even know. Like, what are you talking about? It sounds like the act of a crazy person, But like now it's like when I go speak at something, or like, I was in Dallas a couple weeks ago doing a few live podcasts on stage at some business conference, and I went by myself. I was only there for 3 days. I was looking forward to it. I spent the entire day by myself. Like, they invited me out to go like party, that night with some of the event, happenings or whatever. And most of the time I would do those things because, again, I'm a networker and I like going to those types of things. I think there's more value sometimes in going and hanging out with people after the event than there isn't even like sitting next to them at the event.
Right.
So it was out of character for me, but I was like, no, I think I'm just going to go take myself out to dinner and go see a movie and like just be with me, be with my thoughts, think for a little bit, get some clarity, get some grounding again. And again, like if you can't do that, there's some things that are happening, and it's probably the fact that you just don't trust yourself. You're telling yourself you're going to do stuff and you don't do it, and you have no self-confidence because you never keep the promises you make to yourself. And that's probably why you're not achieving the things that you want to achieve, because you're never doing the things that you know that you should be doing. And so you have this really negative relationship with you, and then that negative perception of yourself rubs off on everybody around you, and it prohibits you from moving forward. But then if you do go out by yourself and actually sit down and have that time, I think that you just kind of gain more clarity around what you want, where you're headed, and do one of those 5-year stocks. That helps me.
Yeah.
Like literally, like I think of every moment of that day. What does that mean? Like I want to wake up and I want my curtains to open automatically. Like timed curtains at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever.
Yeah.
Open up, and then the sunrise and the sun pours into my room, and I can get that light first thing in the morning. And I want a coffee maker right here so that I can just have coffee that's already poured waiting for me. Like there's just certain things that I know that I want.
Yeah.
And so it's a realigning of who I am currently, what I want in the future, and who do I need to become in order to have that future. And am I on the road to becoming that person? And if not, then I need to adjust and change paths or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. That's like a mic drop for everything you just said. For the person who's afraid and avoiding being with themselves and the realities that might appear when they actually do slow down enough, and the person that is committed but needs to remember why they started and what they're really want, and need to be reignited for that how much that's worth it to them.
Yeah, because if you come away with that and you know that that's still the version of life that you want, then it's just part of it.
All right.
You're gonna have slumps and you're gonna feel like crap for like weeks at a time sometimes. It's just if you ever want to do anything extraordinary, those times will come. It's just a matter of like you have to learn how to deal with those times, and you have to learn how to mitigate stress. And you have to learn practices that take you out of feeling anxious and put you into feeling productive. And just if you come away from time with yourself and you're still like, nope, I still know that this is definitely like for me right now, this is where I got to go, but I still feel like I'm in a slump. It's part of the journey.
Well, and I say too, you can make that slump mean two things: that I'm not cut out for this. It's not going to happen for me. Maybe I missed my shot. You can make it mean that. Or you can, if you knew without a shadow of a doubt, and in those moments of quiet with yourself, you remember like, if this is my path, this is going to happen for me. And if I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I would have that life, what would I make this season of my life mean right now?
Totally.
And that means, that I was just part of the process.
Yeah. And I think that's one perspective that doing a podcast helps with tremendously, because I talk to so many people and get so many people's versions of their story and what happened and the upsides and the downsides and the good times and the bad times. And every person that I've ever interviewed that has any level of success, with no exceptions, has had bad times happen. So if you're feeling that way and you look into the future and you can see the version of success that you're going to attain and you believe that it's going to happen. Like I would rather believe that it's going to happen than believe it's not going to happen because we really don't know, because luck
Both
plays a role in it.
possibilities exist.
Right, exactly. But you can choose to believe that it won't or choose to believe that it will. And if you choose to believe that it won't, it's just going to end in anxiety and stress and depression and all these other things. But if you choose to believe that it will, it can lead to a path of opportunity and positivity and all these other
Right.
things. So why not choose to believe that it will? And if I choose to believe that it will, then I can look back at this part of the story and like what I always tell myself in bad times is like, this is going to make a really cool part of my story someday. If you just frame it that way,
I
it's like
agree.
one day when I'm on stage in front of 10,000 people, or when I'm writing my New York Times bestseller, or when I'm emailing my million plus subscriber email list, or whatever, whatever success means to you, or whatever. When I'm telling this story to even if you don't have aspirations of stages or books or
Right.
podcasts or any of those things, and you just want to be successful and have a good family, it's like when I'm telling my grandkids the story of how I built generational wealth for our family from nothing, like what part of the story is this going to be?
Right.
This is just going to be one of those parts where now my grandkid is going through something and they're 19 and they think it's the end of the world, and I can be like, hey, I was 30
Yeah.
and I was going through this really difficult time, and I thought that's 11 years older than you are.
Right.
And it was really, really difficult. And if you're going to go down that path, things are going to happen. But look at where we are now because you stay committed to the process and you're in it for the long term and you're committed. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, how are you going to frame that time
Absolutely.
in your mind?
Because when I think back to the version of me that was so upset and so just like felt backstabbed by people who like didn't believe in me, and
Mhm.
the friends that just completely ghosted me, and how sad I was about that. I could have never seen where I would be now and how that would all come full circle and how it would all end up okay. Um, but I would tell myself, like, looking back on those stages where there were hard times, and there will be hard times in the future, is just like, how can I stay connected to that way of thinking, that like, this too shall pass, and
Mhm.
this is part of it, and you don't know how it's going to end up.
Right.
So it's like, it's actually going to be okay. And I think people need to hear that, especially when they're in the season that like, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this.
Yeah.
But if you don't quit and you stay committed to it, like, you and I have talked to many, 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 many successful people. They didn't get there as a byproduct of not failing or not going through those hard times.
Yep.
So just know that you're in good company.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And by the way, you have permission to take the day off.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wish somebody would tell me that earlier. You don't, when sometimes if you're feeling that way, you're just feeling that way.
Yeah. It doesn't have to
Emotions are
mean.
fleeting. Like we're part of the human experience is experiencing the entire range of emotions that we have at our disposal. That's what makes us different. Like we will have, you will be emotional and you will have those emotions. Now, you don't want to make a habit of just not doing something when you don't feel like it.
Right.
Obviously, you always want to make sure that you're pushing through those things. But every once in a while, if you're not feeling it and it's 4 o'clock and you know that, you got another 2 hours left and it's just like, I don't even know what I'm doing this for. You're having this identity crisis. Like sometimes it's okay to just be like, you know what? I'm just going to pick it up back in the morning. Because it could literally just be that you need some sleep.
Yeah, it's okay to take your foot off the gas, because sometimes slowing down is the best way to speed up.
Yeah, you need to rehydrate.
Yeah.
Like literally, it could just be the fact that you're dehydrated and you're tired.
Yeah.
So take off early, watch your favorite show on Netflix for an hour, drink some water, and go to bed early and get a fresh start in the morning.
Have some athletic greens.
Have some AG1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some delicious.
It always brings me back to life.
Some delicious Vitamita Vegemin.
I love you for that. Man, we could go on and on. There's so much we could talk about, just because your story is so much, like, I feel so much of myself in your story, and I know the people listening can, especially if they listen to the show, because this is what it's about. And that's why I love getting to do what I get to do, which is shedding light on the real process and the real journey of getting to quote unquote success. And that's so subjective. That level of success is so personal for every single one of us. We get to decide what that looks like and what that means. What does winning at life look like for you? And I love that you've just like taken life by the horns, and you define where that ship goes and what that destination looks like. and you give people a path to follow if they're, willing to do that, if they want to do and create a life similar to yours or a business similar to yours. And I know that there are people who are like, how do I want to get connected to you? And maybe Travis is the guy that they're like, okay, now he's the guy I want to be talking to. Where can they find you online? What are you doing? Tell them about your show and how they can stay connected.
Yeah, sure. So if you, whatever podcast app you're listening to this show on, you can search my show, Travis Makes Friends. We used to be called Build Your Network, so don't be confused if you listen to episode 436 and it's a Build Your Network episode. But it's all still relevant, most really, really, really good stuff. And then the one thing I would ask is that we were mainly an audio podcast for, we've been around since 2017. So coming up on 6 years now, which is crazy. And we didn't start releasing on YouTube until January of this year, which was a mistake on my part. But I was so committed to like doing video the right way. If I did, I just didn't want to put like Zoom interviews up on there. And then like we started a video show a week and a half before the COVID shutdowns. So we had to cancel all of our in-person interviews and stuff and go back to Zoom. And so anyway, all that to say, we're finally on YouTube, but we're like way behind on the YouTube side than we are on the audio side. So I would ask if you are listening to go check us out on YouTube at Travis Makes Friends, the username on YouTube. So
Definitely.
That's my ask, at Travis Makes Friends on YouTube. Reach me there, find me there, comment something, and we'll connect.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much more fun to like see the people that you're listening to, because especially those who've been listening to you or me for a while, it's like you know the voice, but it's not often that we get to like actually see the mannerisms and the dynamic. Totally. And it just like, it enhances the quality of my experience when I watch podcasts. So definitely go check out Travis Makes Friends on YouTube. We're going to put all of those show notes or all of those links in the show notes so you can make it easy to connect with Travis and what he's doing. Is there anything else you want people to know before we wrap it up?
That's it. I mean, if you were looking for podcast production, podcast bookings, you want to get booked on podcasts as a guest, or you're a show and you want to book better guests, my agency and my software company, Guestio, we have the agency side and we have the software side, kind of do it yourself and done for you versions of that. So you can find all that stuff over at Guestio.com or shoot me an email, travis@Guestio.com if you got any questions.
Heck yeah. I know there are a lot of podcasters and aspiring podcasters that might need those services. So please go check it out. All of that's in the show notes, you guys. I hope that you learned something valuable this week. I know that you did, that you can go apply to your life, because this is where you come be coachable so we can learn how to do life and business better. Thank you for being here. As always, we ask that you connect with us on social media. We are the Coachable Podcast on Instagram, and we're on YouTube. So come watch us over there if you aren't already. I love you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week on the Coachable Podcast.